I hope you had a good lunch. And are you staying warm? Are you drinking tea? Okay. I'd like to welcome my panel here. The topic this afternoon is women in open source. And what we'll do is we have about 40 minutes to do this talk, this panel. So we'll start with an introduction of the topic. Then we will introduce each of ourselves and talk a little bit about our journey. These are amazing women, and they're doing amazing things to change the world. So I'd love for you to listen to their stories. Then we'll talk a little bit about what's happening in open source. What is the situation with diversity and women participating fully in what's happening with the growth in open source and technology. We'll propose some, actions we are all taking to improve what's happening in the environment. And then we'd like to also include you all in the discussion. We'd like to hear ideas from you all about what we can do to change the environment, what we can do to support women in open source, and make this a really successful world. Okay, so let me introduce myself. I'm Nithya Ruff. I have two roles. I head the open source program office at Comcast, and I also work with the Tech Women group in Comcast. We're really focused on making sure that we have a diverse group of developers working to create products and services for our customers and really transform their experience, because really our customers are men and women in the world. And then the other role I play, I sit on the board of the Linux Foundation. I chair the board, and my role there has been to really open doors to open source to women and people of color and all kinds of diverse people into open source. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Veronica and then to the rest of the panel to really talk about their stories and introduce themselves and their organizations.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Veronica Young. I am the Brigade Program Manager for the Western region at Code for America. So Code for America is a tech nonprofit, and we work in order to make government more accessible to people through technology, particularly in the social safety net. So our focus areas are in criminal justice, food security, and workforce development. My particular role is working with our volunteer network. So there are 85 volunteer chapters across the country, which we call brigades, and they work in their local communities to partner with local government as well as local organizations to create projects or products that are helpful to address issues in their community. And these projects mirror the areas in which Code for America works. So there's a lot of work in workforce development and criminal justice and food security, but also in housing security, disaster relief, and transportation are a few of the other popular topic areas. My skills are really in community organizing, so I'm not a developer or technical person by trade. I come from the world of politics, where I worked in campaigns and elections, and now am able to use those community organizing skills for our Brigade program.
Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Nikki Mustafa. I'm here in the capacity of founder and CEO of FrauenLoop, which is a nonprofit organization based in Berlin, Germany, that I started 3.5 years ago to get more women into programming. My focus at the time, which was just about the height of the refugee crisis in Europe, was to get more immigrants with refugee status and without, as well as resident women in Germany to enter the tech industry, because I had been at the time working for 15, 16 years as a digitalization program manager. So I'm still working as a digitalization program manager in the insurtech field now. And as the CEO of FrauenLoop, what I've kind of focused on is really the commonalities between women who are coming from different countries, women who are coming from different backgrounds, and women who are trying to kind of shift their careers towards more technical subjects so that they can get into this tech industry and have a say in the ways that software is being developed and the future is going to look.
Hello, my name is Kay Alave. I'm one of those women that Nakeema helped to pivot to tech. My background was in journalism and in humanities. Now I work as a data analyst / engineer. I'm originally from Manila, Philippines, but now I live in Berlin, Germany, which is a whole new animal altogether in terms of navigating the tech environment. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Varaha, and I'm Chief Operations Officer for Code for Romania. Just as my colleague here from Code for America, we're a civic tech NGO based in Bucharest, and we have a community of almost 1,000 people all across the world, mostly Romanians. We're developing software pro bono to solve social issues from healthcare to education and domestic violence and all kinds of other areas of interest. And I really hope to manage to give you a bit of a picture of what it is in Eastern Europe for women in technology today. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Why is it important for us to discuss this today? Number of reasons. One, we have a severe shortage in developers across the world, especially as companies become more and more software companies. I mean, I can speak to us as an enterprise. As we move towards software, we find that we are really searching and competing with every other company in the world for good talent. So that's one big reason. The second big reason is studies have proven again and again that as we move to a more digital world, we need to have creators of that technology who are also diverse and who can reduce the bias in the systems. And frankly, the third is one of the best paths for economic empowerment and economic freedom for people is tech. And tech really changes people's lives, and we want everybody to participate in that change and benefit from that change. So you've heard a lot of the stories of how these ladies started these organizations. So I'm going to go talk to you all about, you mentioned briefly, Veronica, the problems that you're trying to solve. How do they use open source, and are they creating projects that help with these different areas like food hunger or housing shortages and things of that nature? Can you describe some of the projects that are being worked on?
Sure. So yes, our communities use GitHub specifically in order to create their products across the country. And so open source is really the foundation of the work that we do, and is incredibly important, especially in, we are a nonprofit, and the work that volunteers are doing are in a volunteer capacity. So folks aren't essentially getting paid for their work. So being able to create on an open source platform really gives the ability for us to do great work in our communities that is not tied to any monetary type of benefit.
But it also helps them build their resumes, and then they can use that to go on to other jobs?
Yeah, I think that's particularly important, especially when we're talking about women in open source, is that open source allows people from not necessarily traditional backgrounds to be able to build their skills and work on projects that you can then use on your resume when you're either breaking into the field or continuing your growth within the technical field. So being able to build on open source and create essentially a resume is a really important tool, and I think particularly an empowering tool for women to be able to continue to break into an industry that hasn't necessarily been friendly to us.
Nakeema, I particularly love what you're doing with FrauenLoop. FrauenLoop means women's loop, right? and I just figured it out just now after talking to you all. But there are some unique challenges you all face in Berlin and in Europe as it pertains to helping women from non-traditional backgrounds enter tech. Can you describe some of those challenges and how you're helping these women overcome some of those challenges?
Sure. I think some of the biggest challenges that we face are that we're reaching out to a broad and a diverse group of women with different perspectives on what tech means. Everyone understands that it's an economic opportunity. Everyone understands that there are long-term career perspectives that may change depending on where you specialize. That's one of the things our program is pretty good at exposing the students to is, you don't have to go into one direction or another. You're really supposed to, over the course of successive cycles, typically 3 12-week cycles, to get a perspective on whether you're more interested in front-end, back-end, data, machine learning, where you feel like you fit and how you would most like to contribute as a technical professional. The challenge has to do with your status more often than not. We train a lot of women who are coming out of maternity leave. They are trying to get out of whatever industry they're working in. They have filed for asylum. They're waiting for a decision and don't know how long they'll be in the country. They've already been in the country for many years and their credentials are not accepted, so they have to work in something under the level that they would like to be at. And for all of these women, the end goal is really where they start off. How am I going to get a job? What is the stability of that job? What's the likelihood that my credentials in a non-traditional program like FrauenLoop going to be accepted by not larger, more established German companies necessarily, but by startups. So younger people, much like myself, who may or may not be familiar with this program, how am I going to build up my professional resume over the course of a non-traditional program in a way that I feel confident that I'm going to get into a permanent job?
You also mentioned that sometimes open source doesn't help. In fact, people are looking at open source suspiciously. Maybe Kay can also shed some light on that.
Just my experience of interviewing in Berlin for roles, for engineering roles that I already have answered their questions, their technical questions, and just to tell them, hey, by the way, I also code in Python, and you can see my stuff in GitHub. And they're like, no, we don't actually believe that, people do that. Like, you've worked on it. There's a bit of disbelief and pushback on top of the institutional barriers that you face. So you always have to prove yourself over and over again to different people.
So, we often kind of very smoothly talk about GitHub being the new resume, right? And that you can actually look at the code and you can look at people's work there. I was shocked when I heard the story that, it's looked at with suspicion in some places as, oh, you must have just cut and pasted it. It's not your work. And I think that's shocking.
Yeah, because I'm not from tech, so how else am I gonna prove to these people that I've done this? It's in an interview process. There's not much opportunity to do that unless you know somebody who knows somebody who will introduce you and who will vouch for you. If you're an immigrant and you don't have those connections, then that's the only way to do it.
You guys are pointing out all of the obstacles that are there for women who come from non-traditional backgrounds, whether it's because of their status or because of their past, background in another field and entering tech. We'll come back and revisit this, which is some of the wonderful things that FrauenLoop is doing to remove some of those barriers. Off to you, Olivia. Olivia, what is happening in Romania? How are you helping women get into tech? How are you enabling them to succeed?
So there's a bit of a different situation, as we are currently, open source in Romania is quite a new phenomenon that we're just starting to talk about, and what this can do to your resume, to build up your career and start getting into tech jobs, be it a woman or just a regular student coming out of college. And what we've seen is that we have a lot of beginners coming in and starting to do work like small tasks in GitHub. We have a very streamlined process of breaking down tasks in 6 to 7, 8 projects and different technologies for everybody to start working on various kind of development tasks. And at that point, we realized that what we can do as an NGO who is not biased, who's not coming from various companies and so on, we're a community that's being like at the middle between government, between companies, between regular citizens, and what we're doing is that we're vouching for these people. So it's really often that we get companies asking us, we have these people coming to interview for a job, and we've noticed they've been volunteering, so their experience is 6 months or 1 year in Code for Romania. Are these people for real? Are these people actually doing a very good job at whatever they've been contributing with in Code for Romania? And we're actually doing this. We're putting out paper, we're putting out recommendations, and it's really different when it comes. You have a community of senior developers, because Code for Romania is made generally 90% are senior developers currently in the organization. You have all these people with 10, 15, 20 years of experience saying, yes, hire these people, they're doing a great job. So we're trying to, at some point in time, we also got out with content as much as we could. I think in 2017, 51% of our community was made of women. Obviously, we don't just have developers, we have also UX, UI designers and communication people. But to us, it was really important to get out with this piece of information. And we've been learning. We're in a culture where we don't necessarily have, oh my God, how many women. We're not really discussing about it because we have bigger issues to tackle, and it's usually that, oh, come on, we have poverty, we have other things. We don't need to talk about this. But we really do need to talk about this. We need to have code of conducts in our companies, in our organizations. We need to talk about how we dress and be more careful in general with this approach. I think I'm having a bit of an issue with my microphone.
Yeah. I'm sure the mic gods at the back will help us with correcting these issues. I know that there are challenges, both to attracting women into this field and having them accepted, in organizations. But you guys are doing some really interesting work in dealing with some of those challenges. So what are some of the challenges and how are you dealing with it, Veronica? And then Nakeema, I would love to hear how you're doing that. And then how do you retain women in tech? Because the environment sometimes do not support, diverse people being in technology.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're fortunate at Code for America. Our organization itself is very women-led and actually majority women, which I think is a great standard for the work that we're trying to do and hoping to be a model within the tech industry in our diversity of both gender and racial makeup, given that the work that we do disproportionately affects people of color because of our systems and the way that they've worked for the last few hundred years. So that's definitely a place of importance for us. We recently did a census to see where our network was. So we have about 20,000 people that show up to Brigade work annually, and we wanted to see who it was that was showing up. And those numbers reflected the tech industry. So we way heavily skewed toward male participants. But one kind of shining light is that when it comes to leadership positions, particularly our national leadership, we have a disproportionate representation of women. So I think it's a continuing area of work and something that we are prioritizing in terms of making goals and strategies around making sure that we reflect diversity in gender in all levels of participation with our organization.
Do people actually stay long-term with Code for America, or do they use that as a building block to go on to something else?
Yeah, it depends. So there are definitely different types of kind of volunteers and how long they stay. Some people might come for one night, one hack night. Some people might stay on for a project. And then we have people that have been in the network for the last 7-8 years since we essentially started. So there is a big range of folks. One question that you asked in terms of how do we retain women in our communities, and I think Olivia spoke to this in terms of having a code of conduct. That's something that we have enforced since the very beginning, and we have very tangible ways to enforce the code of conduct. And so I think that as people feel safe to show up to these spaces as themselves, and behavior that would make one not want to show up is discouraged and eliminated from the community, then it makes a safe space for people to be a part.
If I may add just one more thing, it's also important to notice that both of the work we're doing in Code for America and Code for Romania is nonprofit work.
Yes.
So it's a very different motivation when you're coming in. You're not coming in for a paycheck. You're not coming in to prove you're better than your colleague and you deserve a promotion. It's a way more. It's way more relaxed and it's mission driven and not necessarily getting a better outcome than the other one next to you.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have more places like this all over the world.
Right. Nakeema, I mean, you face a very different challenge, right? I mean,
But we're using the same, a lot of the same techniques. I would say that, as I mentioned, the focus for FrauenLoop was always jobs, full-time jobs, economic inclusion. So in order to get there, and based on just my observations of what I saw lacking, I'd come from the U.S. I'm a U.S. national, where I noticed that there was always a lack of diversity in terms of ethnicity and background. Got to Berlin, and the gender disparity was shocking. So I said, listen, if I'm going to create the kind of environment that I want to experience instead of what I do experience day to day in my day job, I need to enlist women who are themselves a part of the system and who want to change it. And so that's the reason why 80%, this cycle, 90% of the instructors are women. Most of them immigrants, many of them with, Middle Eastern or other backgrounds, specifically to target and to reflect the audience that we want to serve. And, we're all coming from our day jobs, which look very different than our classes, where, we are trying to model the kinds of behaviors, the kinds of aspirations that are lacking still when you have societal and other barriers that lead women to feel that, A, they can't get in, they don't know anyone who can help them to get in and navigate the career path in tech. And really it's something that, in terms of how to attract and retain women, it's one thing to go to a hackathon and see that there may be some women who are instructing you. It's something very different to go every week to a space where women are coming from their tech jobs and saying, I was a journalist before becoming a data engineer. I was, whatever I was doing before becoming a back-end engineer, and I'm doing that actively. And I need you to stick with this because you too can do this. And, I want the company. We all want the company, and we need you in this industry, or else it will never change.
That's a very, very powerful thing that you said, which is the importance of role models, the importance of seeing others succeed. And it tells you, I too can do it, especially if someone looks like me and they have done it, then it gives me a lot of hope that I can too do it. Has it also created a support system for women who are working to come back then, teach others, but also to support each other and say, hey, how can we do this? That you're not alone in facing this, that there are others who are facing this as well.
So, I work in a company of 100, and maybe I'm one of 5 people / consultants who code, and maybe I'm the only woman there. I don't know. And I code mostly in Python. So open source is very important to me, and I've made friends in the open source community in Berlin. And I consider myself a community path programmer. So at work, I try to make my work visible at work so that other people are encouraged, and I try to be open about it. I've also started like coaching with Pi Ladies, yeah, and it's I try to give back to the community, and I guess little things at the workplace because I know that if there's like a newbie and this person is from a different country, I try to welcome them, give them like tips on how the office works. These little things make life a bit easier for them, and if they're interested in what I do, I try to impart my knowledge as well.
But I would also add that I think, open source is one of those things where, at least in my experience in 3.5 years with FrauenLoop, usually no one has worked with Git. No one is familiar with GitHub. They go through this in their first cycle of training with FrauenLoop, and they understand it becomes mandatory as soon as you understand how to use the tools. But the next step of, do you want to look for a project that might be of interest? Do you want to check out whether or not first timers only or one of the various projects that are open sourced could be welcoming for you and could cater to the kinds of skills that you want to practice? The barrier of fear tends to come up again. And what we found with FrauenLoop, which is that lots of technologies which we're training women in, not just web development, machine learning, deep learning, keras, neural networks, all of these kinds of things are so much easier to get your head around when you have a real human, preferably a woman, who's telling you how it works, and that you don't have to worry you'll do something wrong or break something, or and it's the same with open source. It's very difficult to join, yes, an open, yes, a remote, yes, an accessible global community if you don't have a human that you can kind of follow in real time, at least at the start. So we started to bring in women who have experience in just maintaining these projects and dispersing the work, documenting the projects, because this is probably the most important thing, so that it's very, very clear, regardless of where you are sitting and how you're coming to the project, that you can add to this part of the repository or address this issue and not get in trouble.
So it's important to have role models, code of conduct. It's important to document. It's important to have a person that you can reach out to ask questions, who's not going to shame you and say, well, why are you asking these questions? You must be dumb, or, you should know this already, right? And we do that all the time, sometimes in tech. And so it's important to create that safe environment where people can actually learn and not feel frightened of, how they're going to be judged or treated. I know you guys are doing some amazing things, Olivia, in Code for Romania, where you're validating, the work that people are doing, and these people are contributing to some really mission-critical projects. Can you describe some of the actions you're taking to make it safe and successful for women to enter?
So first of all, I think we were one of the first organizations in Romania that really made a big deal out of the code of conduct and putting it on the website and having everybody sign it and approve it once they joined as a volunteer. So everybody was looking at us and what's with all the paperwork? What is this about? I mean, it's really important for us to understand you're in a place where you need to be respectful and helpful with your community. Then we've set up a safe space, email address, and direct contacts for people to actually address any kind of issues they might have within our events and in the community. What we're also doing is that we encourage everybody to join our monthly events, exactly as you were saying. It's really important to have a human contact with somebody that's guiding you through the process. We never really tried to do learning and teaching people to code at our events because we had a huge mass of senior developers coming in the beginning. But now that we've opened the events for everybody, we've noticed a lot of juniors and people who are trying to change their career paths. Actually, one of my favorite volunteers, if I can say that, is a lady. She's 50 years old and she started learning Python at Code for Romania coding events right now. And what we're doing is that we're trying to put up the girls in our core tech team, always on display, always talking at these events, coordinating them, running them, leading projects. And we're trying also to make sure that all of our media appearances are balanced. If we're going to have an interview and they want to talk with 3 or 4 of us, we're going to make sure there's always women, and they're going to be first represented in the article, and they're going to tackle these issues. We're always trying to correct like how we're presented in the media. We're not just the guys from this IT group that are doing some tech. No, we're not the guys. We're the people who are doing social change. And in terms of businesses, the reason why they started trusting us when we say we recommend these people and these women for you can hire them and they're going to be good professionals is that when you're a beginner and you're starting to work on something on GitHub and you're on your own and you're doing probably a good job, but it's a very small project with very little impact, you can go after 1 year in Code for Romania with a project worked for, I don't know, the Department of Emergency Situations or a project for a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and stuff like that. So it's really important that they go in with a resume that says, okay, you're working with really big clients, and if these people are vouching for you, then there must be something good going on there. And these are just initial steps. We're trying to be very careful in how we address all these issues, but baby steps, one step at a time. We just got to get people talking. And I think one of the most important things in our community is that we're also trying to, whenever there's sponsorship coming towards us and whenever we have a new partner showing up, we're trying to make sure that they also check all our points. So we're not going to engage with a company that doesn't respect all these things and doesn't actually make visible efforts to be inclusive and to take care of all these things. Even if it's really difficult for us and we refuse funding, but it's really important to have all those norms checked by all the companies that are coming in contact with Code for Romania.
Absolutely, absolutely. What one thing would you say to this audience on how they can support the work that you're doing? And what one thing that they can do to change the environment? I know it's a tall order, but how can they support you and how can they support the environment for women to be successful?
Sure. So particularly for Code for America, we would love everybody to participate in our volunteer chapters. As I said, we have 85 across the country. So the hope is that where you are, there's a chapter that's close to you. Also, we obviously have opportunities for donations and to follow the work that we're doing. We have a monthly newsletter that we produce. So even just kind of staying on top of some of the work that we're doing is really helpful. In terms of maintaining an inclusive environment, I think just kind of living the values that you would like to see. So obviously, if you are part of an underrepresented group in tech, your presence itself is doing good in terms of moving the dialogue and the reality forward, but also making sure that you are representing the values that you would like to see. So if you don't necessarily identify with an underrepresented group in tech, making sure that the spaces that you're a part of are formalizing ways like a code of conduct or really pushing diversity issues within your company or within your organization to make it a more inclusive and representative space.
Very well said.
Thank you.
I would say, just to add to that, we're based in Berlin, Germany, so it's not so easy to support us directly, but the documentation that you provide for your open source projects and FTO, first timers only, tag the issues that, newbies
Yes.
can kind of consistently look for and feel more confident about contributing to, because it makes a huge difference if you're being pushed from the FrauenLoop mentors to find an open source project and go out and just be brave, and you're like, I'm not brave, I'm looking for roadmaps, and those are really good signs to indicate where your contributions will be welcomed and appreciated.
Is it helpful also if a project has tagged a mentor or said that there's a mentor that can be reached in this project?
There's always
helpful
to have mentors who are volunteering to look at your code and give you feedback. But it's definitely just very hard to navigate if you're on your own. And most times, newbies, relatively junior coders are working on this at home in their own hours, and so they have to figure out who who you are speaking to when you're putting out a call for contributions. And if they don't feel like the language is necessarily speaking to them, it goes a long way to see a tag or a mention that you can be brave and contribute, and someone will look at it, someone will get back to you.
Can people financially support FrauenLoop as well?
They can. We are a nonprofit organization based in Germany. We also have a 501(c) that's a nonprofit registered in the U.S. So always welcome.
Wonderful. What do you think, Kay? What else can the audience do to make the world a better place?
Maybe this is mostly for bosses, hiring managers. Value your employees' work, because a lot of us, we work in open code and we'd love to contribute, but if there's no incentive for us, because our work are not recognized at work, then it's harder for us to join the community and contribute. I mean, Nakeema and I were talking about it yesterday, and I was telling her, I'm using this library, and I want to contribute, but like at work, my data engineering job is not actually formalized. So like, how am I? I would love to do it, but I don't really. They're not giving me enough space and time to do this. So if you're a boss, a hiring manager, and you see your employee doing something with open source, please support them.
Yes. And we've got about 4.5 minutes. Very quickly, what do you think that the audience can do? And then I'll throw it open to the audience.
Well, for starters, I think everybody should be just to pay more attention, especially if you're GitHub maintainers and if you have your own personal project on GitHub and you're looking for contributors. Just make sure you have everything very well documented. It's really hard for somebody that doesn't really know your protocols, and he's joining and he's just looking there, and what am I going to do now? Where am I going to start? What do I need to install, and so on and so forth. And also think of the fact that there's also a very small community of non-developers who are on GitHub. They're usually the QAs, and the QAs are developers, but they're usually the UX designers and UI designers who are also trying to contribute and want to join and want to contribute to open source, and you should also pay attention to those as well, and it's really important. And also, if you have initiatives in your hometowns or in your countries, if you have initiatives that go and start talking to women, like in general school and high school, try to fund them and support them as much as possible, because that is the moment when women can actually decide they want to go into a technical career, but because they don't really understand what does it mean, can I only be a developer, or maybe I can have other jobs or other preoccupations in the tech world, it's really important for them to understand from other role models at that point in time, not when they've joined, I don't know, a college that they don't really necessarily like or are meant for. So try to invest in those NGOs that do this kind of work of counseling young women in going into technology.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience, or any other ideas that you've seen that work? There's a feedback, right?
Yeah.
Oh, microphone? Sorry?
Yes.
Okay. Any other ideas or questions from the audience? Yes.
There you go.
I'll stand so I can be seen and heard. So I had a question for Veronica. So you mentioned the code of conduct and having offline or at least concrete ways for enforcing or kind of supporting the code of conduct. Can you describe some of these approaches that you have at
Yes.
America?
Absolutely. So we empower brigade captains, which are the leaders of the brigade. So each brigade meets in physical spaces, usually once a week or every other week in those locations. So we empower our brigade captains to actually ask people to leave if they violated the code of conduct. And it's pretty immediate. So if somebody violates the code of conduct, it's a hard line, and there isn't necessarily like a remediation process. If you violate the code of conduct, then you'll be asked to leave, and you're not welcome in the space anymore. And the code of conduct is designed so that the offenses are egregious enough in order to warrant that. And then we also have a safe space email that goes to our team if somebody does have a code of conduct issue. We have training in conflict mediation and also resources to other professionals who can help with code of conduct violations.
Another question here. Right?
Hi. How do you navigate when it comes to pay? So, sorry. How can I say this? How do you navigate when it comes to pay and being doing some of the projects that other male colleagues are doing, and advocating for higher pay to be in a similar level as they are? As a woman, I feel that regardless of what area in tech you're going, often your pay is slightly different from a male.
Are you talking about just generally in the tech world?
Yes.
Training. FrauenLoop does, in addition to the technical programming classes, we do workshops. Those workshops have become highly professional in nature over the last few years. Salary negotiation is one of our most popular and most requested. We do mock negotiations, we do kind of walkthroughs, we bring in recruiters, we bring in heads of HR, we actually give women the scripts that they are going to face in the workplace so that they understand that if you don't advocate for yourself and practice speaking out loud what you want to be valued at, you will be undervalued by everyone. So I would say, what we can do is we can empower women, and we try to do that at FrauenLoop, empower women to understand that it is not so much a game, but it is a skill that you really need to develop in order to be compensated properly for your other skills.
I know we've run out of time, but very quickly, know what the market rate is for your level. There's plenty of information out there, whether it's Glassdoor or also ask other women and men in the same type of role. There's more and more transparency now.
Ask men. Ask
Yes.
men.
So thank you everyone for being here and supporting this panel. This is such an inspirational panel. I love what you guys are doing. You're using open source and you're using technology to uplift the world, to welcome new people into this industry. And I'm just honored to be on the panel with you all. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.